In this video, we're going to be doing a follow-up on what happened at the Taurus Eclipse on November 8th. All right, welcome back. My name's Charlie Starr. If you haven't met me yet, I'm an astrologer and tarot reader, and you can book a personal reading with me at charliestarr.com. I did a eclipse video, and I'll put the link above, where you can see what my predictions were for November 8th. And I made two types of predictions in the intro. The first one was I made predictions about what was gonna happen to me, and I wanna give you guys a follow-up because some really surprising things happened. And then the second thing was that I made some predictions about the elections, because we did have election day on November 8th for the United States, and I would like to follow up on that as well. So stay tuned and we'll jump into both the surprising things that happened and the things that did end up actually happening from my predictions. First of all, my personal predictions. How did they go? I predicted that the inheritance money for my mother's house was going to go through on the eclipse, and thus would end the 6-month cycle from 6 months before that at the partial eclipse in Taurus 6 months earlier, where I started working on my mom's house to sell it, and that on the eclipse the house would sell and the money would deposit into my account. So what happened? All right, so this happened kind of. The house sale went through and the money deposited into my mom's estate account. I did not get my inheritance on that day. The money went into her estate account on that day and the sale did close. So that did end up happening. And I did get a lump sum of money, but it wasn't the inheritance money. It was first the reimbursement money for all the investments that I had personally taken out of my own piggy bank and put into the house in order to fix it up and sell it. That total ended up being like around $11,000. So it was a significant chunk of money. And I made that prediction because this eclipse was in conjunction with Mars, which is the ruler of my second house of finances. So in hindsight, what I think is really interesting is that I might have been able to foresee this for two reasons. One, Mars was in retrograde, so that could indicate that money is actually returning to me that was mine in the first place. That wouldn't be inheritance money because that inheritance money was never mine to begin with. That's actually a gift. So it actually makes more sense. It's more symbolically correct that I was getting that money back. Second of all, I could have foreseen a delay because the other thing that I incorrectly actually predicted in the eclipse video was I said that Uranus, because Uranus is in the middle of this eclipse conjunction, that Uranus had the upper hand here. We've been having a T-square between Uranus and Saturn for a couple years, and my prediction was that this eclipse was going to actually give Uranus the upper hand to finally push through that square. That actually did not happen because there was actually a delay. So I talked to the lawyer, the probate lawyer, and she was like, well, we can't distribute the funds yet. We have to basically go over the finances and send out letters towards like all of my siblings and have them sign and return the letters saying that yes, that's the amount that they're gonna get, blah, 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 blah. In other words, there's delays. There's more things that have to happen before that inheritance gets distributed. So there was a bit of a delay. This you could have foreseen because actually, the fact of the matter is that Saturn is in Aquarius, which is Saturn's domicile. And so this T-square is actually locking Uranus in Taurus, and Uranus in Taurus is not in a strong position in Taurus. So Saturn has the upper hand, and Saturn has had the upper hand throughout the bulk of this square for the last few years. And just because Uranus was in an eclipse, that did not end up giving Uranus the upper hand when it comes to battling things out with Saturn. So there was a delay here. I also saw delays in a lot of other things, like in a lot of my friends' lives and things that I predicted for them. The things started to happen, or there was some action taken on it, but there was eventually a delay on those things. And I think that has to do with underestimating Saturn. That's the right word, underestimating Saturn's power in Aquarius here. Second of all, the election results. So I predicted that the election results were going to be unpredictable, surprising, and I did say it once again that Uranus had the upper hand. So let me show you the headlines. As you can see from these headlines, there was a lot of surprising results. There was a lot of red states that ended up voting blue, and that was very surprising to a lot of people. And so there were very like unpredictable results that ended up happening at this election. However, the Senate did stay red. It started out red and it stayed red. And to me, that was another example of Saturn maintaining the upper hand here by maintaining the status quo. So Uranus did have some wins where there was like some surprising things that ended up happening, but Saturn, which always wants things to remain stable and remain the same, eventually took the upper hand, and the party that was in the majority vote in the Senate stayed in the majority vote at the end of the day. The other thing too that I thought was kind of interesting throughout the election, there's like a lot of little things like this, but for example, like in Arizona, we had the machines for the polls actually were breaking down and they were suddenly not working. So this very much to me is Uranus, which has to do with things happening suddenly, unexpectedly, and also has to do with technology. So this brought like a instability to the technology surrounding the poll or surrounding the votes, right? But then they actually appealed for an extension on the hours of the poll being open in Arizona, and it was actually denied, which I think is very much Saturn in Aquarius having the upper hand on this T-square once again, because Saturn is saying no. However, it did extend the time that they were counting the votes, and it also extended the time that they were open just to let the people that were still in line finish voting, which they did do. So once again, there's a delay, which delays are also very Saturnian. So that was interesting results for the election. Thirdly, I wanted to talk about something that happened to me that was very surprising at the eclipse. So with Uranus, there is an unpredictable element, right? So there's something to the point where like I couldn't even predict it, which it was very presumptuous for me to go into this eclipse video and say, well, you know, the eclipse is only a few days away, so I can already see how this is going to play out for me. And yes, it is true, the house, my mother's house did close, the money did drop into her inheritance box, I did get some money. So those things did end up happening. It was sad. Venus was in Scorpio. It was sad. Those things were all true, right? So to an extent, I did accurately predict these things. However, there is Uranus right smack in the middle of this eclipse. And so it's a little presumptuous for me to say that I could have predicted that this would happen exactly the way that I thought. So what happened to me? On the, within 24 hours of the eclipse being exact, I went climbing. I recently joined a climbing gym and I really enjoy it. You could say this is another Uranus and Taurus thing because it's something completely new to me, and it's also like Taurus is the earth and it's rocks. So I'm rock climbing, right? So I was rock climbing with my partner and I ended up falling and I broke my ankle. I fractured my distal fibula, and I ended up having to go to the ER. It was very, very painful. It was a trauma injury. And on the whole way on the ride to the hospital, I was like delirious, nearly vomiting, nearly passing out, just trying to like not pass out. And I was laughing because I was going, very well played, Uranus, well played, because I did not see this coming. And it was this eclipse was in conjunction with Mars, and my personal Mars. And Mars is a planet that has to do with trauma and injury and sports, right? And so this was like, also Mars and Taurus is not happy here. So it's more likely to play itself out in such a manner. So this was very interesting to me and very hilarious to me, and it did help me laugh my way through this experience. And also on top of this is the fact that if you know about annual perfections, Mars is the Lord of the Year. If you don't know what that means, it just means that this year Mars is a very important planet in my chart, and Mars is going to fulfill something major that is being expressed in my birth chart. So Mars's original placement is going to have a major impact. So having an injury here to my bone, which was so funny because it's in conjunction with the ruler of Aquarius, and Aquarius also having that square to Saturn. Aquarius and so Saturn has to do with the bones and Aquarius specifically has to do with the ankle. So again, I thought this was hilarious and I've never broken a bone before. So that was very Uranian because it's completely new to me. Okay, so anyway, I thought that was really interesting. So here's my little tribute from the eclipse. The other thing is that like people talk about eclipses being very like chaotic and very unfun to begin with. I wonder here if the square from Saturn was actually protective, because as I was going into the ER, I felt very strongly assured that I wasn't going to need surgery, and that ended up being the case. Even though I had a bad fracture and it went all the way through the bone, they told me that I wasn't going to need surgery, and to me, I felt like finally, you know, Saturn in Aquarius, that square was doing something that was actually positive or protective, which was like keeping things sort of stable, so that the bone like didn't displace, didn't go completely awry or out of alignment, and so I wasn't going to need surgery. So don't always think about Saturn as being a bad thing. Sometimes Saturn is a protective thing, and yeah, anyway, so I thought that was funny and I really wanted to share that with you. Another thing that was interesting that happened a couple hours away from the eclipse night itself was wild, you guys. Like, I won't go into all the details, but it was like very crazy energy. My cat was going nuts. That night I went and hung out with my siblings. We had a event that we did together, and the third house, the eclipse was happening in my third house of siblings. And it's also the house of short distance travel, which, you know, rules like cars. So on the road, I ran into my brother. I didn't have a collision with my brother, but I just saw him on the road driving next to me. And I thought that was like very much third house energy. And then when we were almost home, there was a car that was across the street from our house that was like up in flames. Like it was like full on in fire and on fire. And we had to like call the police. We had to call the fire department to come and put it out. And that was also very much a third house because it's a car. It's near my house, so short distance travel on my way home. And it was also very much in conjunction with my Mars, because Mars is of course a fire planet and has to do with these sudden sort of like trauma experiences. And of course fire is one of those things. So anyway, once you guys start to like put together all these pieces for like what these different planets symbolize, you'll start to see this stuff everywhere. And I really wanted to share that with you guys. So hopefully that was interesting. Please leave a comment below about what happened to you at this eclipse. I did get a bunch of new subscribers about my eclipse video, and so thank you so much for subscribing, and hopefully you guys are watching this so you guys can do your own follow-up on the eclipse energy. Have a good day and thanks for watching.